Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Haley with Haley Stitches, and today I'm going to show you how to make a super easy herringbone quilt using just 2 charm packs. You can download a copy of the free pattern using the link in the description below. Let's get started. These are the supplies we'll be using today. I'm going to use 2 charm packs. The first one is Quaint Cottage by Gingerbread, and then a solid Bella Solids, a matching thread, a marking utensil. I'm using a friction pen. You'll also need a cutting mat and a rotary cutter. Pins are optional but helpful. A long quilting ruler that's long enough to go the diagonal of your charm pack. And then I'm using 4.5-inch square rulers to trim up my half square triangles. And I'm also going to be using a block lock ruler just to show you how that works. Everything will be linked in the description below. The free pattern has an option to cut background yardage if you don't want to use a solid charm pack. To make this quilt, we're going to make half square triangles 2 at a time by pairing all of the color charm pack with the background charm pack. So it's pretty easy. It's just making half square triangles. To make your half square triangles 2 at a time, you're going to draw a diagonal line on the back of your lighter color square. I love using friction pens for this because they disappear with heat, but don't use them on lines that are going to show up on the front of your quilt because I've heard that they can reappear in cold temperatures. I haven't had that happen, but I've heard of it happening, so better to be safe than sorry. To make your half square triangles, pair your fabric right sides together. Right sides together just means that the pretty side of the fabric is touching the other pretty side of the fabric, and then you're going to sew a 1/4 inch away on either side of the marked line. After you're done sewing it, you're going to trim along that center marked line. And by trimming along this line, it's going to cut the square in half, but because we sewed on each side of the line, you're going to result in 2 identical half square triangles. So that's where it gets the 2 at a time method name. Now it's time to press these triangles, and for half square triangles, you always want to press towards the darker fabric. And the last step is to trim. So you can use a regular square ruler. That's totally fine. The most important thing for trimming half square triangles is that the 45-degree line on your ruler lines up with the diagonal of the half square triangle. And I personally like to use these block lock rulers. It has a little shelf that butts up against that diagonal line, and it gives you a really accurate cut, and you don't have to worry about it sliding around. So these are going to be trimmed to 4.5 inches. So I'm going to use that block lock ruler and then rotate everything around to trim the other 2 sides. A rotating mat is super helpful for making half square triangles as well. I do have a video that will teach you how to make half square triangles faster if you're interested in speeding up this process because it can be a bit time consuming. After all that, you'll end up with 2 identical half square triangles measuring 4.5 inches, and I recommend keeping them paired together for quick assembly. Repeat that process to get a total of 80 half square triangles. You'll end up not using 2 squares from each pack. And now it's time to assemble our quilt top. So there are 2 ways you can assemble. You can assemble by rows, but that does get a little tricky because you have to pair the colors together. So the pattern is actually written to be assembled in columns just to make this a little bit easier. If you have the space to lay everything out, I do recommend doing that. But if you have to go 1 column at a time, that's totally fine as well. Just make sure you're paying attention to the placement to make sure that all of those pairs are working together in the way that you want. One trick I like to use if you have the space to lay everything out like I do is to take a black and white picture just to make sure the color is distributed evenly. So now you'll assemble all of your rows in the layout or all of your columns if you're going in that direction. I decided to go by rows because I have enough space to lay everything out. One thing I want to point out is that this top row, you'll see there's only 1 charm pack of these colors in the top. You'll use those same pairings for the bottom row. They're kind of like half rows just to get the herringbone effect, the offset effect. And for pressing every other row, you're going to press in opposite directions to get those nice nested seams as we assemble everything together. So this is what it'll look like after everything is pressed, and you'll see things are starting to really line up here. If you're assembling it in columns, just press 1 column one way, 1 column the other, and so on, so you get the same nesting effect. And the last step is to sew all of your rows or your columns together, and you'll get the final quilt. This quilt measures 32.5 inches by 40.5 inches, making it a great baby size. If you love the simplicity of this 2 charm pack quilt, check out this video where I show you 20 different layouts you can get using just 2 charm packs. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you there next.